My sister smashed my grandma's mug and told me to leave, so I exposed their cruel plan to take over my home and made them regret everything. My name is Cassandra Mitchell, but everyone calls me Cassie. I'm 32 years old and worked hard for years as a software developer to finally buy my dream house in Seattle. Growing up in a modest suburban home outside Portland, my childhood memories are filled with the constant shadow of my sister Amanda, 4 years older than me. Amanda always commanded our parents' attention. Harold and Diana Mitchell, my well-meaning but flawed parents, established a family dynamic that I didn't fully understand until I was much older. Amanda was their firstborn, their special girl, and somehow that translated into a household where her needs always came first. Cassie, let your sister have the last cookie, or, Cassie, give Amanda that toy. She's having a bad day, were common refrains throughout my childhood. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, they did. But their love came with the unspoken expectation that I would understand my place in the family hierarchy, Amanda first, everyone else second. While Amanda was the social butterfly with a flair for drama in high school, I found refuge in books and computers. My parents attended every one of her dance recitals and school plays, their faces beaming with pride. My academic achievements, while acknowledged with a perfunctory "good job, Cassie," never seemed to generate the same enthusiasm. When I won the state science fair in 10th grade, my mother's first response was, "That's nice, but can you hurry back? Amanda needs the car for her date tonight." Despite this, I excelled academically. Scholarships took me to college, where I majored in computer science. The tech world welcomed my analytical mind and problem-solving skills. After graduation, I secured a position at a growing software company in Seattle. While my career flourished, Amanda's life took a different trajectory. She bounced between jobs in retail and food service, never quite finding her footing. Her relationships followed a similar pattern, a series of passionate beginnings that inevitably combusted within months. Through it all, our parents served as her safety net, both financial and emotional. "Your sister is sensitive," my mother would explain during our weekly phone calls. "She feels things more deeply than most people." This explanation was offered for everything from Amanda's inability to hold a job to the dramatic breakups that left her temporarily homeless. As I climbed the corporate ladder, eventually becoming a senior developer at one of Seattle's most innovative tech firms, the contrast between our lives grew more pronounced. I saved diligently, lived below my means, and at 32, achieved my dream of buying my own home, a beautiful 3-bedroom Craftsman with a view of Puget Sound. Amanda, meanwhile, had just lost her job as a restaurant hostess when her latest boyfriend kicked her out of the apartment they shared. "The economy is just terrible right now," my father explained during a call last October. "Amanda's having a really tough time finding work. Her landlord is being unreasonable about the rent." I listened, already sensing where this conversation was heading. My new house, with its spare bedroom and generous square footage, had become a topic of frequent discussion among my family members. "It would just be temporary," my mother chimed in from the extension, "just until she gets back on her feet." Despite the knot forming in my stomach, I found myself agreeing. After all, that's what family does, right? They help each other in times of need. And maybe, just maybe, this could be an opportunity to repair our strained relationship. Besides, temporary meant a few weeks, perhaps a month at most. How bad could it be? When Amanda arrived at my doorstep 3 days later, the 4 suitcases and numerous boxes suggested a different understanding of temporary than mine. Her smile seemed genuine enough as she marveled at my home. "Wow, little sister really did well for herself," she remarked, her eyes scanning the open-concept living area with its hardwood floors and contemporary furniture. There was something in her tone, something I chose to ignore in that moment, a hint of resentment, perhaps, or entitlement, a warning sign I should have heeded. The first day passed pleasantly enough. I showed her to the guest room with its attached bathroom, explained the basics of the house, and even took her out to dinner at my favorite local restaurant. Amanda was charming, asking about my work and complimenting my taste in home decor. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought perhaps we had both matured enough to move beyond our childhood dynamics. That illusion began to crack the very next morning when I found her using my expensive skincare products without asking. A small thing, perhaps, but the first ripple in what would become a tidal wave of boundary violations. When I mentioned it, she responded with a casual shrug. What's the big deal? Sisters share stuff all the time. Besides, you can afford to buy more. That comment, laden with assumptions about my financial situation and cavalier disregard for my personal belongings, should have been my second warning. But again, I chose harmony over confrontation. After all, she was going through a difficult time, and these were just face creams, not worth starting a conflict over. Little did I know that this small incident was just the beginning of a pattern that would escalate until it reached a breaking point, leaving shattered ceramic and family ties in its wake. The first week of Amanda's stay seemed manageable. Despite the small daily irritations, I maintained my work routine, grateful for my home office that allowed me to close the door and focus on coding projects. Amanda spent most days lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and applying for jobs online. At least, that's what she claimed she was doing. By the second week, the minor annoyances began multiplying. I would return from a quick grocery run to find Amanda had invited 2 friends over, strangers to me, who were making themselves comfortable with my wine collection. These are my friends from my last job, she explained breezily, not bothering to introduce us properly. I told them they could crash here tonight since they're in town. When I pulled her aside to explain that I wasn't comfortable having strangers stay overnight without prior discussion, her expression darkened. God, Cassie, when did you become such a control freak? They're just crashing on the couch. It's not like your precious house is going to fall apart. That night, my parents called. Somehow, they already knew about the friend's situation. Amanda says you're being really strict with house rules, my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment. She's going through such a hard time, honey. Can't you cut her a little slack? The calls became a regular occurrence. Every minor disagreement between Amanda and me somehow made its way back to our parents, always framed as me being unreasonable or unwelcoming. The narrative was consistent, successful Cassie being mean to struggling Amanda. Meanwhile, living with my sister revealed habits I hadn't been exposed to since we shared a childhood bedroom. Dishes were left in the sink until mold formed. Wet towels were abandoned on bathroom floors. Lights and electronics were left on when she went out. When I suggested she help with cleaning or at least pick up after herself, I was met with eye rolls and accusations of being uptight. Some of us are dealing with actual problems, Cassie, not just whether the dishwasher is loaded correctly, she snapped one evening when I asked her to rinse her breakfast dishes that had been sitting since morning. One particularly frustrating incident occurred when I discovered she had been using my home office while I was out. My carefully organized desk was disheveled, reference books moved, and my ergonomic chair settings altered. More concerning were the crumbs on my keyboard and a coffee ring on important client documents. I needed a quiet place to make some calls, she explained when confronted. The living room has bad reception. Besides, you're not using it when you're not here. The invasion of my workspace crossed a professional boundary. As a software developer handling sensitive client information, I couldn't risk unauthorized access to my work materials. I installed a keyed lock on my office door the next day, which prompted another angry call from my mother. Amanda says you don't trust her now. She feels like a prisoner having to ask permission for everything. The stress began affecting my work performance. During an important video conference, I could hear Amanda playing loud music despite my earlier request for quiet. A crucial deadline was missed when I discovered she had unplugged my backup drive to charge her phone, causing me to lose hours of work. I've never seen you submit work with so many bugs, my manager commented during our weekly check-in. Is everything okay at home? How could I explain that my 36-year-old sister had essentially hijacked my life? That my once peaceful sanctuary had become a battleground of passive-aggressive comments and violated boundaries? One evening, I returned home to find Amanda wearing one of my favorite blouses, the silk one I saved for special occasions. That's my blouse, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I've asked you not to go through my closet. She examined her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing the fabric over her hips. It looks better on me anyway. Your style is so boring and corporate. When I insisted she change, she stormed off to her room, slamming the door like a teenager. 20 minutes later, I found the blouse tossed on the bathroom floor, a makeup stain on the collar. The comments about my fancy house and privileged life became a daily occurrence. Amanda seemed determined to frame my hard-earned success as some unfair advantage rather than the result of years of hard work and careful financial planning. "Must be nice to have this huge kitchen when you barely cook," she remarked one morning as I rushed to make coffee before an early meeting. "Some people would be grateful to have a roof over their head," I responded immediately, regretting engaging with her bait. She smirked. "Oh, believe me, I'm so grateful to Princess Cassie for allowing me to live in her castle. Should I curtsy when you enter the room?" The sarcasm stung, but what hurt more was the realization that my sister viewed my accomplishments not with pride but with resentment. In her narrative, I wasn't successful because I worked hard. I was simply lucky or privileged or both. As October turned to November, I began counting the days until my sister would announce her departure plans. Surely, after nearly a month, she had made progress in her job search or apartment hunting. But whenever I broached the subject, Amanda would become defensive. "Why, am I cramping your perfect life? Sorry, we can't all be tech geniuses making six figures." The tension continued building, like pressure in a sealed container. Something had to give, and unfortunately, that something would be much more than my patience. When my parents called to discuss Thanksgiving plans, I naively saw an opportunity to restore some normalcy to my home life. Hosting my first holiday in my new house had been a dream of mine, a chance to create new traditions and perhaps even impress my family with my accomplishments. "We'd love to come for Thanksgiving," my mother said enthusiastically. "It's so wonderful that you and Amanda are reconnecting. This will be our first holiday with both our girls under the same roof in years." Her framing of the situation as a sisters' reunion rather than the uncomfortable housing arrangement it actually was left me momentarily speechless. But I pushed aside my frustration and focused on planning the perfect Thanksgiving. I spent weeks preparing. The menu was meticulously researched and planned, balancing traditional favorites with some contemporary twists. I ordered a heritage turkey from a local farm, selected wines to pair with each course, and even handcrafted a centerpiece for the dining table. The guest room was deep cleaned and prepared for my parents with fresh linens and a small welcome basket. Amanda observed these preparations with mild amusement, occasionally offering unsolicited advice but never actually helping. "Mom prefers her stuffing with chestnuts, not oysters," she'd comment before returning to her phone. The day before Thanksgiving, my parents arrived in their sensible sedan, bringing with them the familiar dynamic that had shaped my childhood. My father hugged me warmly, while my mother immediately gravitated toward Amanda, fussing over how thin she looked despite evidence to the contrary. "Cassie, the house is certainly modern," my mother commented as I gave them a tour. Her tone suggested this wasn't entirely a compliment. "I would have thought you'd choose something more traditional with your practical nature." "The neighborhood seems expensive," my father added, glancing out at the manicured lawns of my neighbors. "I hope you're not overextended financially." These subtle criticisms continued as we moved through the house. The kitchen was awfully large for someone who works so much, and my home office was so impersonal. Each comment chipped away at my pride in what I had accomplished. Amanda, meanwhile, had transformed into the perfect daughter in their presence. She helped my mother unpack, listened attentively to my father's stories, and kept up a steady stream of self-deprecating humor about her job situation that somehow made her unemployment seem charming rather than concerning. "I'm just so grateful Cassie had this big empty house to share," she told them over pre-dinner drinks. "It's been such a blessing during this transition period." The way she emphasized transition suggested a brief, temporary arrangement, contrasting sharply with the near-permanent residence she seemed to be establishing. My parents nodded approvingly, my mother reaching over to pat Amanda's hand. "That's what sisters are for," she said, giving me a pointed look that clearly communicated her expectation that I would continue housing my sister indefinitely. Thanksgiving Day itself dawned bright and clear. I was up early, preparing the turkey and side dishes with the precision I usually reserved for debugging complex code. By the time my family gathered around the table at 2 o'clock, the house was filled with delicious aromas, and the table looked like something from a magazine spread. "This all looks lovely, Cassie," my father said, genuinely impressed. Indeed, my mother agreed, though she immediately began rearranging the place settings I had carefully positioned. The meal began pleasantly enough. The food was delicious, the wine flowed freely, and for a brief time, it felt like the family gathering I had envisioned. Then Amanda began steering the conversation toward family memories, carefully selecting stories that highlighted her achievements or instances where I had fallen short. "Remember when Cassie tried out for cheerleading and tripped during her routine?" she asked, laughing. "And now look at her, all coordinated and grown up with her fancy job and big house." The comment was delivered with a smile, but the sting was intentional. My failed cheerleading attempt had been a painful memory, one of many instances where I had tried to follow in my sister's footsteps only to fall short. "Well, we can't all be natural performers like you, Amanda," my mother chimed in, missing or ignoring the barb. "Cassie was always more about books than the spotlight." As the meal progressed, Amanda continued her campaign of backhanded compliments. "This turkey is surprisingly moist, Cassie. I didn't think you had time to learn to cook with your important career, and the table setting is beautiful. Did you hire a decorator, or did you actually develop taste since college?" I maintained my composure, reminding myself that this was just one weekend. Soon, my parents would leave, and eventually, Amanda would move on as well. I just needed to get through these few days. After dessert, the conversation turned to more serious matters when my father brought up Amanda's job search. "Any promising leads?" he asked, helping himself to another slice of pumpkin pie. Amanda sighed dramatically. "It's so tough out there right now. I've had a few interviews, but nothing that matches my experience level." I had to bite my tongue to stop from pointing out that in the week she'd been staying with me, I hadn't once seen her prepare for an interview or leave the house for one. "We know it's hard, sweetheart," my mother said soothingly. "That's why we transferred some money to your account yesterday. Just a little cushion until you find something suitable." This casual mention of financial support caught my attention. While I had worked my way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, taken on student loans that I had only recently paid off, and saved diligently for years to afford my house, my parents were still subsidizing my 36-year-old sister's lifestyle. "That's very generous," I said carefully. "I didn't realize you were still helping Amanda financially." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father cleared his throat. "Well, we help both our daughters when they need it," he said, though we all knew that wasn't true. "I hadn't received or asked for financial help since college." "Some of us just need different kinds of support," Amanda added, her tone implying that my need for validation was somehow equivalent to her need for cash. After dinner, while loading the dishwasher, I overheard my mother and Amanda whispering in the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but their furtive tone raised my suspicions. Later that evening, I went to my bedroom to retrieve my grandmother's silver earrings to complete my outfit for family photos, only to discover that her jewelry box had been moved from its usual place on my dresser. Opening it with trembling hands, I was relieved to find the earrings still there, but several other pieces seemed out of place. A pearl bracelet that normally lay in the top compartment was now tangled with necklaces in the bottom section. A small diamond pendant, a college graduation gift from my parents, was missing entirely. When I returned to the living room and casually mentioned the missing pendant, Amanda avoided eye contact while my mother quickly changed the subject. The incident left me uneasy, but I decided not to press the issue during the holiday. Instead, I made a mental note to thoroughly check my valuables once my parents left, adding yet another worry to my growing list. That night, I lay awake long after everyone had gone to bed, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and sounds of a full house. What should have been a joyful family gathering had instead become an exercise in restraint and forced smiles. My dream home, once my sanctuary, now felt invaded. And worse, I had the growing suspicion that the invasion was only beginning. The morning after Thanksgiving dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I had slept poorly, my dreams filled with vague anxieties about missing possessions and whispered conversations. Still, I was determined to make the most of my parents' final day before they drove back home. Perhaps without the pressure of the holiday meal, we could actually enjoy some quality time together. I padded down to the kitchen early, before anyone else was awake, and began preparing coffee. From the cabinet, I carefully selected my special mug, the one my grandmother had given me shortly before she passed away. It wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, just a handcrafted ceramic piece with delicate hand-painted bluebonnets, my grandmother's favorite flower, but its sentimental value was immeasurable. She had given it to me during our last visit, pressing it into my hands with a warm smile. "For my Cassie," she had said, "so you'll think of me with your morning coffee. Remember, you're stronger than you know." My grandmother had been the one person in my family who seemed to truly see me, to value my quiet determination and analytical mind. While my parents focused on Amanda's more obvious charms, my grandmother had recognized and nurtured my potential. Her belief in me had sustained me through difficult times, and this mug was my tangible connection to her wisdom and love. I had just poured my coffee when Amanda appeared, already dressed and unusually alert for the early hour. "Morning," she said, heading straight for the coffee pot. "I need your car today." Not, "Can I borrow your car, or would it be possible to use your car?" Just a statement of what she needed, as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. "Good morning to you, too," I replied, taking a sip from my special mug. "What do you need my car for?" She rolled her eyes, as if my question was unreasonable. "I have some errands to run, job interview stuff." Something in her vague response raised my suspicions. In the weeks she'd been staying with me, she'd never mentioned a specific job prospect. "Which company?" I asked. "Just a place downtown," she answered evasively. "You wouldn't know it." Before I could press further, she added, "So, can I have the keys? I need to leave by 9. I hesitated. 2 days earlier, I had noticed a new scratch on my car's passenger side that hadn't been there before. When I asked Amanda about it, she had denied any knowledge, suggesting it must have happened in a parking lot. But the location and angle of the damage made that unlikely. "I'm not comfortable lending you my car," I said finally. "The last time you used it, it came back damaged." Her face flushed with anger. "Are you seriously still on about that scratch? I told you I don't know how it happened." "That's part of the problem," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "You don't take responsibility for things. My car came back damaged after you used it, and you didn't even mention it to me." "Oh my God, you're so obsessed with your precious possessions," she snapped. "It's just a car, Cassie. Things get scratches. Life isn't perfect like you try to make it." "It's not about perfection," I explained, feeling my own frustration rising. "It's about respect and responsibility. If you borrow something and damage it, you acknowledge it. So what, now I need a lecture on responsibility from my perfect little sister?" Her voice rose, filling the kitchen. "Not all of us can be Miss Perfect with the perfect job and the perfect house and the perfect life." Our raised voices must have woken our parents because they appeared in the kitchen doorway, my father's hair still rumpled from sleep, my mother tying her robe around her waist. "What's all this shouting about?" my father asked, looking between us with concern. Amanda immediately shifted her body language, her shoulders slumping as she turned to our parents. "Cassie won't let me borrow her car for my job interview. She says I'm irresponsible." The transformation was remarkable. In seconds, she had gone from aggressive to victimized, her voice taking on a wounded quality that I recognized all too well from our childhood. "Cassie," my mother began in her disappointed tone, "your sister has an important interview. Surely you can help her out." "Her car came back scratched last time," I explained, "and she didn't even tell me about it. I had to discover it myself." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Cars get scratched, honey. It's not the end of the world." "That's not the point," I insisted, feeling increasingly frustrated by their inability to see the real issue. "It's about taking responsibility." If Amanda had just said, "Hey, sorry about the scratch," that would be different. So now I need to apologize for something I didn't even do? Amanda's voice rose again, her victimhood temporarily forgotten in her indignation. "You were the only one who drove my car that day," I pointed out. "So you're calling me a liar?" she demanded. "I'm saying the evidence suggests you were responsible for the scratch," I replied, trying to remain logical despite the escalating tension. Amanda's face contorted with rage. "You think you're so much better than me with your fancy tech job and your big house. You've always been so smug and judgmental." "This isn't about judgment," I said, clutching my coffee mug tighter. "It's about basic respect for other people's property." "Property, property, property," she mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "That's all you care about, your precious house, your precious car, your precious stuff. Some of us are struggling just to survive while you're obsessing over a tiny scratch." My parents watched this exchange with growing distress, my mother wringing her hands, my father looking between us uncertainly. Neither stepped in to defuse the situation, their silence effectively endorsing Amanda's behavior as they had done throughout our lives. "Amanda, please calm down," my mother finally said. But her gentle request did nothing to stem my sister's building rage. "No, I will not calm down," Amanda shouted. "I'm sick of walking on eggshells in this museum she calls a home. I'm sick of her judging me because my life hasn't worked out as perfectly as hers." As her tirade continued, I remained quiet, sipping my coffee and trying to process the disproportionate reaction to a simple declined request. This was about much more than a car or even a scratch. This was years of resentment bubbling to the surface. Then, in a move I never saw coming, Amanda lunged forward and grabbed my grandmother's mug from my hands. Before I could react, she hurled it against the kitchen wall, where it shattered into dozens of pieces, coffee splattering across the white paint. "Get out of your own house, you spoiled bitch," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. Time seemed to stop. I stared in horror at the broken pieces of my most treasured possession scattered across the floor. Coffee dripped down the wall in dark rivulets. The kitchen fell silent except for Amanda's heavy breathing. My parents stood frozen, their expressions shocked but not intervening, not defending me, not acknowledging the line that had just been violently crossed. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Something inside me hardened in that moment, a resolve crystallizing as clearly as the morning light streaming through the window. Without a word, I walked to the kitchen counter, placed my hands flat on the cool surface, and took a deep breath. "I think," I said with a calmness that surprised even me, "that I need some time alone right now." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, past my stunned parents and my still fuming sister. As I climbed the stairs to my office, I heard my mother's voice, not checking on me, but soothing Amanda. "Sweetheart, let's go for a walk. You need some fresh air." The front door opened and closed. From my window, I watched my parents leading Amanda down the street, my mother's arm around her shoulders, my father walking protectively on her other side. The sight was so familiar, so reminiscent of countless childhood incidents where Amanda's outbursts were met with comfort while my hurts were left unattended. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't a child unable to understand the family dynamics at play. This time, I had resources and agency. And this time, I wasn't going to let it go. I sat at my desk, hands trembling slightly as I opened my laptop. My intention had been to distract myself with work, to lose myself in the clean logic of code until I could process the violent destruction of my grandmother's gift. But when my laptop screen illuminated, a notification caught my eye immediately: "Unusual sign-in activity detected on your account." As a software developer, I take digital security seriously. My email accounts and devices are protected with two-factor authentication and monitored for suspicious activity. This alert indicated that someone had accessed my primary email account from an unfamiliar device. Clicking through the details, I saw the access had occurred yesterday morning while I was out buying last-minute Thanksgiving ingredients. The location data showed the login had happened right here in my home. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Someone in my house had accessed my email without permission. Given that only 3 people had been in my home yesterday morning, and 2 of them had been watching football in the living room, it wasn't hard to guess who the culprit might be. Driven by a growing sense of unease, I began checking my other accounts. My banking app showed no unauthorized transactions, but when I logged into my work email, I discovered several sent messages that I had no recollection of writing. Opening the first one, addressed to my manager, I felt the blood drain from my face. "I've been reconsidering my position with the company," the email read. "My current home situation is requiring more of my attention, and I may need to request a reduced schedule in the coming months. I'll keep you updated as I sort through some personal matters." The email was signed with my name and even included my standard email signature. The implications were staggering. Someone, almost certainly Amanda, had not only accessed my work email but had actually impersonated me to my boss, potentially undermining my professional standing and planting seeds for future disruption of my career. 2 more emails showed similar concerning content, one to HR inquiring about extended leave policies, another to a colleague mentioning family obligations that might require me to step back from a key project. Each message subtly but effectively laid groundwork for excuses about decreased performance or availability. My heart racing, I pulled up my browser history next. Most recent searches had been cleared, but the browser's autofill function revealed recent searches for phrases like sibling living arrangements, legal rights, and establishing residency requirements. Next, I checked my downloads folder and found several PDFs that had been accessed recently. Opening them revealed legal documents about tenant rights in Washington state, specifically focusing on establishing residency claims without a formal lease. One document was titled, "How Family Members Can Claim Right to Property Through Extended Stay." The picture forming was deeply disturbing. It appeared that Amanda had been researching ways to establish legal claims to my home through extended residency. In Washington state, someone living in a property for a certain period could potentially claim tenant rights, even without a formal agreement, making eviction a complex legal process. Further investigation of my file system revealed a folder I didn't recognize on my desktop. Opening it, I found scanned images of my financial statements, property tax records, and even photos of my house deed. These were personal documents I kept in a locked file cabinet in my office, meaning Amanda had not only invaded my digital privacy but had physically searched through my secured personal papers. Moving now with growing urgency, I pulled out my phone and checked my credit card app. While I hadn't noticed unauthorized transactions in my checking account, my credit card told a different story: small charges at local stores, a salon appointment, online shopping orders to sites I never used, all within the past 3 weeks. None of the individual charges had been large enough to trigger my attention during my busy workdays, but together they added up to over $2,000. Most disturbing of all was a recent application for a new credit card in my name, which had been started but not completed. Someone had my social security number and was potentially attempting to open fraudulent accounts. As a final check, I pulled up my cloud storage, where I keep backups of important communications. There, I found folders containing text message screenshots. Opening one file revealed a conversation between Amanda and our mother from 2 weeks earlier. "How long do you think before Cassie gets tired of having me there?" Amanda had asked. "Don't worry about that," our mother replied. "Your father and I have been emphasizing how important it is for her to help family. Besides, the longer you stay, the harder it will be for her to make you leave. Larry says after 30 days, you'd have some legal standing as a resident." "Perfect," Amanda responded. "The house is big enough for both of us, and it's not like she can't afford it. I deserve some stability after everything I've been through." The screenshots continued, revealing weeks of conversations plotting what amounted to a gradual takeover of my home. My parents were not just aware of the plan, they were active participants, offering advice and encouragement to Amanda. Another conversation from just 3 days ago showed Amanda telling our parents, "I think I need to create some leverage. Cassie's being difficult about the car and asking too many questions about my job search. Maybe you could talk to her when you're here about family obligations." My mother's response made me physically nauseous. "We'll remind her how fortunate she is and how important it is to share that fortune with family. Your sister has always responded to guilt." The systematic betrayal took my breath away. This wasn't just Amanda being temporarily difficult or taking advantage of my hospitality. This was a coordinated plan to essentially commandeer my home, manipulate my career, and potentially damage my financial standing, all with my parents' knowledge and support. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable: screenshots, legal documents, unauthorized emails, credit card charges, all painting a picture of deliberate exploitation. The broken mug, which had seemed like the ultimate violation just an hour ago, now appeared to be merely the visible symptom of a much deeper betrayal. I spent the next hour organizing all the evidence, creating screenshots, saving files to a secure external drive, and documenting the timeline of events. My analytical mind, the same one that made me good at my job, now methodically built a case that no one in my family would be able to deny. As I worked, I heard the front door open and close, voices in the entryway indicating my family had returned from their walk. Amanda's voice was calmer now, my mother's soothing tone suggesting the crisis had passed in their minds. They expected, as they always had, that I would eventually come downstairs, apologize for my part in the conflict, and things would return to their dysfunctional normal. But nothing would ever be normal again. The trust was irreparably broken, not just with Amanda but with my parents, who had enabled and encouraged her behavior. I connected my laptop to the large television in the living room, transferring my screen display to the bigger format. Then I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and headed downstairs to confront my family with the truth they could no longer hide. I descended the stairs with a strange sense of calm. The initial shock and hurt had been replaced by something cooler and more focused. This wasn't about a broken mug anymore. It was about setting boundaries that should have been established years ago. My family was gathered in the living room, their conversation stopping abruptly when I appeared. Amanda sat between our parents on the sofa, her eyes still red from crying. My mother had her arm around Amanda's shoulders in that familiar protective gesture. My father looked up, his expression guarded. "Cassie," my mother began in her conciliatory tone, "we were just talking about what happened. Amanda feels terrible about the mug, don't you, dear?" Amanda nodded unconvincingly. I lost my temper. "I didn't mean to break your stuff." The casual dismissal of my grandmother's precious gift as stuff reinforced my resolve. This wasn't going to be another situation where a half-hearted non-apology would be deemed sufficient. "I'd like to have a family meeting," I said calmly, moving to stand beside the television. "There are some things we need to discuss." My father shifted uncomfortably. "If this is about the mug, I'm sure we can find a replacement. Your sister said she's sorry." "This isn't just about the mug," I replied, picking up the remote control. "It's about a pattern of behavior that I've recently discovered." I pressed a button, and my laptop screen appeared on the television. The folder labeled evidence was prominently displayed. "What's this about?" my mother asked, her arm tightening around Amanda. "I've discovered some concerning activities that have been happening in my home," I explained, my voice steady. "After this morning's incident, I checked my computer and found some things I think we should all discuss openly." Amanda's posture changed immediately, her body stiffening as her eyes fixed on the screen. "First," I continued, opening the email folder, "someone has been accessing my work email without permission and sending messages to my manager and colleagues, impersonating me." The emails appeared on screen, clearly showing the content suggesting I might need to reduce my work commitments. "I didn't write these emails," I stated firmly. "They were sent from my account yesterday morning while I was grocery shopping. Amanda was the only person here with access to my computer." Amanda's face flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you forgot you sent those." "I also found these," I continued, ignoring her denial as I displayed the legal documents about establishing residency claims. Downloads about how to claim legal rights to someone's home after staying there for a certain period. Interesting reading material for someone who's supposedly staying temporarily. My father's expression changed, concern creeping into his features. "Cassie, what exactly are you suggesting?" Instead of answering directly, I moved to the next piece of evidence, the credit card charges. "These are unauthorized charges on my credit card over the past 3 weeks. Over $2,000 spent at stores I never visit and on items I never purchased." I scrolled through the list, highlighting salon appointments, clothing stores, and online orders. "And this," I added, displaying the incomplete credit card application, "appears to be an attempt to open a new card in my name." Amanda's face had gone from flushed to pale. You're making this up to make me look bad. You've always been jealous of me. And finally, I said, ignoring her accusation as I opened the folder of text message screenshots, I found these conversations between Amanda and both of you, discussing plans to establish her permanent residence in my home, with or without my consent. The messages appeared on screen, damning in their clarity, the deliberate planning, the references to creating leverage, my mother's comment about how I responded to guilt, all laid bare on the large display. The room fell into stunned silence. My mother's face had drained of color, her arm dropping from Amanda's shoulder. My father stared at the screen, his expression a mixture of shock and shame. Amanda looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting between the evidence on screen and the door, as if calculating her escape route. This isn't what it looks like, my mother finally stammered. We were just trying to help Amanda through a difficult time, by planning to essentially take over my home? I asked. By encouraging her to manipulate me and potentially damage my career, by discussing how to establish legal claims to my property? You're taking things out of context, my father attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. The context is clear, I replied. This was a coordinated effort to take advantage of me, my home, and my financial resources. It wasn't a temporary arrangement. It was a takeover plan. Amanda suddenly switched tactics, tears filling her eyes. I was desperate, Cassie. I have nowhere else to go, and you have this big house all to yourself. Why can't you share with your own sister? Sharing would have been you asking to stay longer and us discussing it like adults, I countered. What you did was invasion, deception, and theft. You accessed my private emails, impersonated me to my employer, used my credit card without permission, and researched ways to claim legal rights to my property. That's not sharing, that's fraud. My mother began to cry, her hands trembling. We just wanted to make sure Amanda would be okay. You're doing so well, and she's struggling. Is it so wrong for family to help each other? Help is freely given, not taken through deception, I said firmly. What you were planning wasn't help, it was exploitation. And the fact that you were all discussing it behind my back shows you knew it was wrong. My father, ever the peacemaker, tried a different approach. Cassie, I understand you're upset, but we're family. Surely we can work this out without making accusations. Amanda made a mistake. But this wasn't a mistake, I interrupted, my voice remaining calm but firm. A mistake is accidental. This was deliberate and planned. The text messages make that clear. I turned to face Amanda directly. I want you out of my house by tomorrow afternoon. Her eyes widened. You can't just throw me out. I have nowhere to go. You can stay with Mom and Dad, I replied. They seem very invested in your welfare. But all my things are here now, she protested. I can't pack everything by tomorrow. You managed to bring it all here. You can manage to take it away, I said. Anything left behind after tomorrow will be considered abandoned property. My mother stood up, her tear-streaked face hardening. Cassandra Mitchell, I raised you better than this. Family doesn't throw family out on the street. And family doesn't conspire to take advantage of family, I countered. I've made my decision. Amanda leaves tomorrow, or I call the police and report the credit card fraud and identity theft. I have all the evidence I need. The mention of police involvement changed the atmosphere instantly. My father's face paled, and Amanda's defiance crumbled. You wouldn't really call the police on your own sister, my mother whispered, though her uncertainty was evident. I sincerely hope I don't have to, I replied honestly. But I will protect myself if necessary. My father, always the pragmatist, recognized the situation for what it was. Amanda will be out by tomorrow, he said quietly. We'll help her pack. Amanda shot him a betrayed look. Dad, you can't be serious. This is Cassie being dramatic as usual. The evidence is right there on the screen, Amanda, he said, gesturing to the television. What you did, what we all did, was wrong. We're lucky Cassie isn't pressing charges. My mother began to sob in earnest now, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. But where will she go? What will she do? She'll come stay with us until she finds a place, my father decided. It's what we should have offered in the first place instead of putting this on Cassie. Amanda's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally defeat as she realized her plan had spectacularly backfired. Fine, she muttered. I never wanted to live in this sterile museum anyway. I ignored the barb. I'll be changing all my passwords and security measures tonight. I'll also be contacting my bank, credit card companies, and employer to report the unauthorized access. I won't mention your names if everything is resolved promptly and completely. My father nodded, accepting the terms of what was essentially a negotiated surrender. We understand. I have one more condition, I added. I want an actual apology, not for the mug, though that meant more to me than any of you seem to understand. I want an apology for the breach of trust, for the invasion of privacy, and for the disrespect you've all shown toward me and my home. A heavy silence fell over the room. My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My father stared at his hands. Amanda glared at the floor. I'm sorry, my father finally said, his voice rough with emotion. You're right. We betrayed your trust. It was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. My mother nodded tearfully but couldn't seem to form the words. Amanda remained silent, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. Amanda, I prompted. She looked up, her expression a mixture of resentment and shame. I'm sorry I got caught, she said bitterly. It wasn't the apology I had hoped for, but it was perhaps the most honest statement she had made during her entire stay. At least now I knew exactly where we stood. I'll be in my office, I said, disconnecting my laptop from the television. I suggest you all start packing. As I climbed the stairs again, I heard my mother's muffled sobs and my father's quiet attempts at consolation. Amanda remained silent. The family dynamic that had shaped my entire life was finally shifting, painfully but irrevocably. For the first time, I had set a boundary and held firm, regardless of tears, manipulation, or guilt. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss, like grief for the family relationship I had always hoped for but never truly had. Yet beneath the sadness was a growing sense of liberation. For once, I had advocated for myself instead of accommodating everyone else's needs and demands. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind, "You're stronger than you know." As I closed my office door behind me, I finally understood exactly what she had meant. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity and emotion. True to his word, my father supervised Amanda's packing, occasionally appearing at my office door with awkward questions about boxes or packing materials. My mother alternated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and stony silence. Amanda avoided me entirely, stomping around the house and slamming doors as she packed her belongings. By Sunday afternoon, my sister's possessions were loaded into my parents' car and a small U-Haul trailer they had rented that morning. The guest room that had been Amanda's domain for weeks was empty again, though not particularly clean. Makeup stains marked the bathroom counter, and the carpet showed several suspicious spots that would require professional cleaning. The goodbye was brief and strained. My father hugged me stiffly, whispering another apology in my ear. My mother kissed my cheek, her eyes still red from crying. I hope someday you'll understand. We only wanted what was best for both our girls, she said, her voice trembling. I understand your intentions, I replied carefully. But your methods were deeply hurtful and disrespectful. Amanda offered a curt nod as her only farewell, sliding into the back seat of our parents' car without meeting my eyes. As they pulled away from the curb, I felt a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't until later that evening, sitting alone in my quiet house, that I recognized the feeling as freedom. The moment the car disappeared around the corner, I sprang into action. First, I called a locksmith, who arrived within the hour to change every lock in the house. Next, I contacted my bank and credit card companies, explaining that my cards had been used without permission and requesting new accounts. I spent several hours changing passwords on every account I owned, from email to streaming services, setting up additional security measures wherever possible. Monday morning, I met with my manager to explain the unauthorized emails, showing him the evidence I had collected. To my relief, he was understanding, even sympathetic. "Family situations can be complicated," he said, making notes to document our conversation. "I appreciate your transparency about this breach. Take whatever time you need to sort things out." That afternoon, I consulted with a lawyer about identity theft protection and home security measures. Though she assured me that my swift actions had likely prevented any lasting damage, she helped me file reports with the credit bureaus and suggested additional steps to safeguard my personal information. "Family identity theft is more common than most people realize," she told me, "and unfortunately, it's often complicated by emotional considerations that make victims reluctant to pursue legal remedies." I nodded, understanding all too well the conflicted feelings she described. Despite the clear evidence of their betrayal, part of me still hesitated to take actions that might permanently damage my relationship with my family. The lawyer seemed to sense my conflict. "Remember," she said gently, "setting boundaries isn't punishing others. It's protecting yourself. You have every right to feel safe in your own home and confident that your identity is secure." Those words stayed with me in the quiet days that followed. My house, once invaded and tense, gradually became my sanctuary again. I deep-cleaned every room, removing the last traces of Amanda's presence. The kitchen wall, stained by coffee when my mug shattered, received a fresh coat of paint. The empty space on my shelf where the mug had lived remained vacant, a reminder of what had been lost but also of what I had gained through standing up for myself. The first week passed without contact from my family, no calls, no texts, no emails. The silence was both a relief and a new kind of pain. For all the dysfunction in our relationship, they had been constants in my life. Their absence created a space that felt simultaneously empty and full of possibility. During this period of silence, I found unexpected support from friends and colleagues. When I tentatively shared parts of what had happened with my closest friend, Elaine, her response was immediate and validating. "Cassie, what they did was absolutely not okay," she said firmly over coffee. "You didn't overreact. If anything, you were remarkably restrained." Her words helped counter the lifetime of conditioning that had taught me to doubt my own reactions, to always assume I was being too sensitive or difficult when I expressed discomfort with how I was treated. Other friends offered similar support, many sharing their own stories of family boundary violations and the struggles to establish healthier relationships. 2 weeks after the confrontation, my father called. The conversation was stilted at first, both of us carefully avoiding the raw topics that hung between us. Eventually, though, he broached the subject. "Your mother and I have been doing some thinking," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "about what happened at Thanksgiving, about a lot of things, actually." I remained silent, waiting. "We were wrong," he continued, "not just about the situation with Amanda but about how we've treated you for a long time. We've been unfair, expecting you to always be the reasonable one, the one who gives in." The admission surprised me. My father had rarely acknowledged mistakes in the past. "Amanda is staying with us for now," he added. "She's not happy about it, but we're insisting she find a job and contribute to the household. We should have done that a long time ago." I murmured agreement, not trusting myself to say more. "Anyway," he concluded awkwardly, "we'd like to see you sometime, when you're ready. No pressure." That call marked the beginning of a slow, cautious rebuilding. My mother called next, her apology more emotional but also more genuine than my father's. She had always struggled to see the family dynamics clearly, viewing Amanda's behavior through a lens of maternal protection that distorted reality. Now, forced to live with Amanda's daily demands and entitlement, she was beginning to understand what I had experienced. "I always thought you were just stronger," she admitted during one call. "That you didn't need us as much as Amanda did. I never considered that maybe you just learned not to ask because we weren't really listening." Amanda and I remained estranged. According to my parents, she had found a retail job and was saving for her own apartment, though they seemed skeptical about her commitment to independence. I wished her well but felt no obligation to re-establish contact. Some relationships, I was learning, were better observed from a distance. As winter turned to spring, I found myself creating new traditions and patterns. Sunday brunches with friends replaced the obligatory family phone calls that had punctuated my weekends for years. I joined a hiking group and discovered a love for outdoor photography. My home became a gathering place for people who respected my boundaries and valued my company. Therapy helped, too. With professional guidance, I began to unpack the complex family dynamics that had shaped my self-perception. I learned to recognize patterns of people-pleasing and excessive responsibility that had followed me from childhood into adult relationships. Most importantly, I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish or mean, it was necessary and healthy. Think of boundaries as defining where you end and others begin, my therapist explained. Without them, people blur together in unhealthy ways. 6 months after the confrontation, I invited my parents to dinner at my home. The visit was brief and somewhat awkward but markedly different from previous interactions. They asked questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my responses. They complimented my home without backhanded comparisons or subtle criticisms. When they left, my mother hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Cassie," she whispered. "Not just for your success but for who you are." The words I had longed to hear for decades brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Our relationship remained a work in progress, full of old patterns that sometimes reasserted themselves. But for the first time, I felt seen by my parents, recognized as an individual rather than merely as Amanda's sister or the family problem solver. As for the broken mug, I eventually found an artisan potter who specialized in custom pieces. I commissioned not a replacement but a new creation, a mug that incorporated elements of my grandmother's gift while being distinctly its own piece. The bluebonnets remained, but now they grew from cracks in the design, a visual representation of the Japanese concept of kintsugi, finding beauty in broken places. The new mug sits on my shelf now, not as a replacement for what was lost but as a symbol of what has been gained. Each morning, as I drink my coffee, I'm reminded of my grandmother's words and the truth I finally embraced: I am stronger than I knew, strong enough to set boundaries, to demand respect, and to create a life defined by mutual care rather than obligation or guilt. Family relationships are complex, a tapestry of love, history, and sometimes pain. The threads that bind us can support or strangle, depending on how they're woven. I've learned that loving my family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that sometimes the greatest act of love, both for ourselves and others, is to say, "This is not acceptable." The journey continues, with steps forward and occasional slides back. But the path is irrevocably changed. I walk it now with confidence in my own worth and a clear vision of the relationships I want in my life, chosen family and blood relatives alike.